Hey guys, welcome back to Retro Bits. Today we'll be installing the orange box on an Atari 800. What? Not that orange box? Well darn, that would have been epic. Today we'll be installing what's in this orange box apparently. I'm Matt D'Amico and welcome to episode 64. Really? Episode 64 and we're not doing a Commodore video? Welcome to episode 64 of Retro Bits. Alright guys, what we've got here is a package from my friend Kevin. Now, he contacted me because he had a project he needed some help with, and I thought it would be an interesting video for the channel, so I agreed to help out, and so he sent me this package. And what we've got here, I'll move this off to the side. Oh, Kevin always packs everything so well. So what we've got here is the Atari 130 XE. Now this is the third iteration of the Atari 8-bit home computers that began all the way back with the 400 and the 800 in 1979. Now this model came out in 1985, and while it's functionally the same as the 800 XL that came before it, it's been redesigned with the same styling cues as the Atari ST, which also came out in 1985. I'm not going to do a full review of the Atari 8-bit home computers, but we'll get to that someday. Now along with the computer, Kevin also sent along this. And this is going to be the meat and potatoes of today's video. What we have here is the ultimate 1 megabyte upgrade for the Atari 8-bit home computers. Despite its name, it is much more than just a simple RAM expansion though. It has multiple user configurable OS ROM and BASIC slots, so you can install your own operating systems. It also has Sparta-DOS X installed by default. If we look around back, it has a battery-backed real-time clock installed, and in conjunction with other hardware, it can even give us hard drive access on the machine. Now, it's not a new product. This thing has been around for many years, but I'm not an Atari expert and I've never used one before, so this is new to me. So we'll be installing this thing today, and assuming that goes well, we will put it through its paces and see what it can do. Before we start, we want to make sure that the system is in good working order. The last thing we want to do is install the upgrade and then be chasing our tail when something doesn't work right. So I dug around in the box and I found this cable, and it looks to be an Atari power cord that goes to a USB adapter here. And if we look closely, we can see it's got the Brewing Academy label on there. So it looks like this is a little power supply for the system instead of the big power brick that normally would come with the machine. I won't need the little charger though, as I've got USB power built right into my desk. And another thing we'll need is an AV cable for the machine, and it uses a standard 5-pin round DIN connector, and the pinout is roughly the same as the old style Commodore 64 or the TI-99 4A, and I have both of those cables, although I don't have an Atari cable. All right, so here we go. That looks good. We've got the ready prompt. Now, if this machine is like my Atari 800 XL, if we hold down the option button while we turn the machine on, it should start in a diagnostic mode. So let's give that a try. Yep, there we go. There's the self-test. Let's just hit start and do the memory test. If I'm not mistaken, the 130 XE has 128K of memory on board as standard, compared to the 64K of my 800 XL, so it's no surprise it's taking a while to get through the RAM test. Alright, well it looks like it completed and started over again from the beginning, so I would say that we have a fully operational Atari and we are good to start the disassembly process. All right, so here we go. I've not taken one of these machines apart before, so You'll have to bear with me, but it looks to be fairly standard. I see 4 screws right here, so let's just start with what we've got. All right, that was easy. What else do we have here? I don't see anything holding the keyboard in place. There are no screws visible, so I'm just gonna assume it lifts right out. Yep, looks to be the case. And yep, there's a ribbon cable there. We want to be very careful about that. There are no releases, so we'll just, oh, the motherboard isn't screwed in either. Oh, that's interesting. Go gently. Could have been more gentle there. Sorry, Kevin. But yeah, there's nothing at all holding this board in place. It appears that there should be screws here, 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 in addition to the 4 that go through. So I guess someone's been in here before. All right, while we're here, let's take a quick tour of the Atari 130XE motherboard. Again, not an exhaustive review. We'll be looking at these systems more in depth at a later time. But for now, some of the important features are the MMU chip and the OS-ROM chip. Both of these chips need to be desoldered and removed because the Ultimate 1 Meg upgrade assumes the functionality of both of those chips and indeed provides ribbon cables which would go into sockets that we're going to install to connect to the Ultimate 1 Meg. Other interesting things here, we have the 6502C CPU. This one is manufactured by NCR. And then we have both the Antic and the GTIA chips, and these in combination provide the graphics for the machine. And then over here we've got the Pokey chip, which of course provides the sound. Other things, we've got the basic ROM here and the onboard memory there, and a few other chips such as the Freddy chip and the PIA chip here. That pretty much rounds out all of the custom ICs on this board. So let's get to desoldering and installing sockets for both the MMU chip and the OS-ROM chip. All right, so here we've got the MMU chip, and I'm noticing some pretty questionable solder joints already. I don't know if you can see that, but they don't look very good, and I don't think this is a result of someone trying to work on this board already. And the reason I say that is because they appear all over the system, and many of the chips have these questionable solder joints where there's like little holes, little volcanoes blown in all of them. Now, I'm wondering if I shouldn't go and reflow all of these, or if I should just leave well enough alone. You know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and the machine is working perfectly right now. So I think what I'll do is I will press on with desoldering the chips I need to, and we'll go from there. So today, as usual, I'll be using my trusty Heiko desoldering tool. I love this thing, and I don't know how I went so long without it. It really does make the entire process much, much easier. And it might be a little bit of an expensive piece of kit, but you know, you buy once a quality tool and you bought it for life. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through all of these and touch them up with a little bit of fresh solder just to help the desoldering process. I might even add a little flux to them. There we go. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. There are a few that need to be touched up again, so I'm going to add some more solder and then try them once more just to make sure that we've really got everything out of there. But most of them came out really nice. I love this tool. It doesn't jam up because the entire length of the pipe is heated, unlike some of the other tools where they constantly need cleaning. The Heiko never needs to be cleaned. Yeah, I think those 4 just needed a little bit of help. Let's try again. Yeah, that's looking really good now. It's just this one that's left. I think that's good. Let's see if the chip is released. No, not yet. Just want to make sure each leg is properly released from the side. Last thing we want to do is damage any of the traces here, right? Yeah, the thing is a bunch of the solder wicked up around here. You see that a bunch of the solder has kind of wicked up through the legs on this side too, which is going to make it a little bit harder to remove. Yeah, so I'm absolutely not messing around with damaging any pads. I don't want to lift any traces. So we're going to do this with hot air. I put some Kapton tape down, and we're just going to loosen up the solder that's wicked up through the top and get the chip off that way. And there we go. Yep. That is by far the easiest way when you've got solder that's wicked up there. Without clipping the legs of the chip, you don't have to worry about damaging anything that way. All right, cleanup. I'm going to apply a little bit of flux to the board, and then I'm just going to use my soldering iron and some tape, some braid, and just clean up these pads. Flip it over and check the back side as well. Got just one hole that's being a little bit fussy. There we go. Yeah, nice and clean now. And last but not least, a little IPA, clean up the flux. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. And there we go. I'm quite happy with how that turned out. Everything's looking really good there. All cleaned up. All right, with the chips desoldered, it's time to install some new sockets. Last one, time to reorder. Make sure that we line up pin 1 to pin 1. There we go. Now, as I understand it, other models of the Atari 8-bit home computers had these chips in sockets already from the factory. The XEs maybe not as much, so you may not have to go through any of this when you install this 1 megabyte upgrade on your own machine, this may be only something you have to do on certain models or revisions. So check for yourself before you go through the trouble of ordering the parts. You may be a simple bolt-on installation for your machine. Of course, we'd have a loose pin already popped up through the top, so I'm going to have to push that back down while I heat the pad and get that seated flush again, and then we'll pick up where we left off. I mentioned earlier that I don't have any real experience with the Atari 8-bit home computers. We had Apples and Commodores in the classroom, and my friends had Apples and Commodores, and later PCs, but no one I knew had an Atari 8-bit computer. So I really never got to experience them back in the day, and I was young and didn't really know the difference, honestly, between the Atari 2600 and the 8-bit home computer. I had plenty of experience with the game system, and to me it was all the same. I didn't know that the system was any different. So I kind of owe the Atari an apology. I never really understood what it could do, and always compared it to the Commodore 64 because I was big into Commodores as a child. And that really wasn't a fair comparison to make. The 8-bit home computer came out in 1979, a full year before the VIC-20 and 3 years before the Commodore 64. So I really have a lot of learning to do about this system, but everything that I found out about it in the intervening years has really changed my mind about what I had conceived this machine to be, and it is far more capable than I ever gave it credit for. Certainly a well-engineered piece of hardware here. So I do owe it a full review, and I promise I will get to that at some point in the future. I do have the 800 XL over there, and I've been meaning to do a first look at that at some point as well. So yeah, we'll get to that when we can. But in the meantime, nothing I've said will be a surprise to die-hard Atari enthusiasts, but just keep in mind that I am still learning about these systems. That's the whole point of these exercises. So forgive me my past transgressions, and I promise I will make it up to you guys sometime in the future. All right, let's take a look. Yep, I'm happy with how that came out. They're nice and flush with the board, and the solder joints look pretty okay to me. So I think we can move on. Nice. So just out of curiosity, I took apart my Atari 800 XL just to see if the chips were socketed or not. And as it turns out, my MMU and my basic ROM are indeed in sockets, but the OS ROM itself is not, so you would still have to do some desoldering if you had this revision of board. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that your mileage may vary and you won't know what you're signing up for with the ultimate 1 megabyte upgrade until you actually take apart your machine and look inside. However, regardless of what generation or revision of board you have, you're not going to be able to fully escape soldering, and that's because the ultimate 1 megabyte, while it does attach to the sockets that we've installed, it also has a pin header that needs to attach to 4 different pins on the CPU in order for it to function. So let's install that now. Now, for the purposes of choosing which wire goes to which pin on the CPU, it is labeled here on the board. We can see that pin 1 goes to Phi 2, pin 2 to RW, 3 is reset, and 4 is halt. So we just need to pick which wire is going to go to which, and so if you just arbitrarily decide that red is going to be the first upper wire on the pin header, then we can go from there. But it has to be that way. If we ever remove this and put it back together, we have to remember that that's how it was wired up. Now, I do not love the idea of soldering directly onto the pins if it could be avoided, but there really isn't a better way to do this without removing the CPU. Now, there are products that you can buy a little riser board that the CPU will sit on, but desoldering the CPU to install that riser board is more destructive potentially than just wiring these on. So we're just going to go ahead and wire these up. There's only 4 of them, and it can be easily removed if we decide to remove this mod later. And there we go. That wasn't too bad. That looks all right to me. Now with the soldering done, all that's left is to connect up the board and mount it. And for that purpose, they've provided us with some of these standoffs, and the instructions for the product indicate that they want us to drill through the ground plane of our board in order to install these standoffs. And in fact, they only provide one mounting location. So it would be mounted kind of floating on one standoff here. I do not want to destructively modify this board, so I will not be drilling through the ground plane. Instead, what I think I will do is I will mount some double-sided tape to the underside of the board, and then I will adhere it here onto the RF modulator, because that is in the location they wanted us to mount it, but it's non-destructive and it can be removed anytime after the fact. What I'll be using is some of this 3M Scotch foam-backed double-sided adhesive tape. It's very sticky, and it should work very well for mounting this board. So the nice thing is that it'll be easily removable when we're done. I'm just going to cover up these pins here, so something like that, and that will give us a nice centimeter, well, not quite, offset from there, and the foam should adhere like so, and we'll just peel off the sticky backing. Easier said than done. There we go. And with a little luck, just press it down there, and voila, we have ourselves a properly mounted board that isn't going anywhere and won't require us to modify the board in any destructive way. Now you may be wondering why I didn't mount it somewhere else, somewhere more centrally located or closer to the front of the board. And the reason for that is when the board is installed in the case, which we need to line up all the ports correctly. There we go. When the board is installed in the case, the keyboard, of course, occupies all of this space here. And so there's no room on this whole half of the main board to mount this. It has to be mounted somewhere on this back half. And the RF modulator was kind of a natural good place for that. So moving on. We remembered that the red faced forward. And I think what I'll do is I'll probably either get some zip ties or perform some kind of strain relief on this. We don't want any of these solder joints to be broken off. So we'll do some cable management on this later once everything is in its place, because I'm not happy with just having them floating around like that. Next, we need to install these ribbon cables, and the red stripe indicates pin 1. So we just need to locate our pin 1, which is going to be here. So I guess this is the way it goes. We'll just press that right into our socket. There we go. Very nice. And we can connect that one up. And same story here for the MMU chip. Pin 1 is in this direction. There we go. And these are keyed, so you can't mess them up when you install them on the board. All right, and there we go. We're going to have to do some cable management here. In fact, let me do that now. I'm going to sneak this under here and back around. Install that there. Very good. All right, for now, this should be good enough for testing purposes, and then we can do some better cable management afterwards. Taking a look at the product's website, it states that installation of this upgrade takes me approximately 5 minutes, and even a rookie can handle it at home. I think that's a bit optimistic, given this system at least. Perhaps if all 3 chips were already socketed and you purchased the add-on CPU breakout, but otherwise some amount of soldering is always going to be required. Alright, so before we do anything else, I want to test the installation and make sure that it's working properly. So I've installed the keyboard just temporarily, I haven't bolted anything back together, and hooked up the monitor. So let's see what we've got. Okay, promising. It's doing something. All right, we've got Ultimate Clock installed, and it booted into Sparta DOS X. So this is the default state of the Ultimate 1 MB upgrade, is to boot into DOS. There are no devices attached to the machine, so nothing is going to work here. But we have a successful installation and the machine is operational. Now, in order to get to the menu on the Ultimate 1 MB, we need to press both Help and Reset at the same time, but we have to hold down Help, press and release Reset, and that will bring up the Ultimate 1 MB menu. Now here in the menu, we can set the options. There are a lot of options, and we'll go through this later on, but there are pages and pages of options. But the default options allow us to configure the system RAM. So we have a couple of different options here, 578K, 328K, stock, and 1088K. And then down here we can configure, wrong page, we can configure the OS ROM, and we can also change the basic ROM. So instead of booting into Atari Basic, we could boot into an assembler. And in order to do that, of course, we have to disable Sparta DOS, because that is going to always boot by default when it's turned on. So let's hit S to save and escape to exit and reboot the system. We've got a loader screen, it's booting, and we're in the assembler. So there we go. We can select the OS and basic ROM, and in fact we can load different ROM images directly into the flash storage of this device, so we can have our own operating system or version of BASIC if we want to. So everything looks like it's working. Let's get this thing buttoned up. So what I've opted to do here is route the wires around behind the RF modulator, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to dab a little bit of hot glue here to provide strain relief. And in addition to that, I found one other gotcha that you should know when you're installing, if you're going to tape it like I did, and that is, we'll remove the tape. Right here, there are contacts for the RF modulator, and if you install this battery too close to the RF modulator, the battery is actually going to touch these contacts and short them out. So make sure when you mount it that the battery is sufficiently far enough back from those contact points. You know what, just for good measure and to prevent any future problems from coming up, I'm going to take a small piece of Kapton tape and I'm going to cover up those terminals so that there's no chance of them shorting out in the future when somebody else is in here and they may try and reseat the card or reinstall it in the wrong position. There we go. Just a little extra insurance policy for the future. Okay, and there we go. It's not my finest work ever, but it's going to hold these things in place and provide adequate strain relief for the pins, for the little solder joints there. Now, one trick you could do is take your hot air station and reflow this to make it look all pretty, but you know what? It works and no one's ever going to see this, and hot glue is, you know, it is what it is. So let's call that good and get this thing reassembled. All right, the machine is put back together. We're back up and running. Everything is checking out. So let's see what else the Ultimate 1 MB upgrade can do for us. Here we can see the Ultimate BIOS version and plugin version. The card is upgradable, so you can load different plugins into the flash memory that will enable additional functionality with other hardware devices that you've attached to the system, so it is fully software upgradable. Moving over to this page, we can set the real-time clock and enable or disable additional add-ons to the machine, such as stereo Poke chips, which we don't have on this particular system. On the next page, we can enable the hard drive BIOS, and this device will allow us to mount both FAT32 and Atari native hard drive partitions, so we will take a look at how that works later on. You need an additional expansion to the system to be able to do that, but all of the configuration options are here in this menu. Now, there are a bunch of other menus that we can look at. Nothing that we're going to do anything with today because they require attached devices to the system that we don't yet have. And we can enter the loader, which is a whole nother program which allows us to mount cartridge images, disk images, and hard drive partitions, which we will look at a later time. So that's all fine and well, but what can you actually do with a 1 MB upgrade? Well, for starters, having built-in Sparta-DOS X gives you convenient access to any real floppy drives or drive emulators you may already have. You can also use the extra memory as a high-speed RAM disk. There are also a handful of modern games and demos that require the extra RAM to function, such as this bad Apple port that was released in 2017. The Ultimate 1 MB really comes to life when paired with another upgrade that Kevin also sent along, the Side 3 cartridge. With this add-on, we'll be able to utilize all types of cartridge images up to 1 MB, ATR floppy images, and even hard drive partitions. So that's all the time we have for today. In the next episode, we'll give the Ultimate 1 MB and Side 3 cartridge a thorough workout and demonstrate all of their powerful features in action. If you enjoyed this sort of thing, don't forget to like, subscribe, or leave a comment. I hope you enjoyed this bit. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.